So we have our jet design finished and we've added some materials, but let's go ahead and finish up the look of the jet, and we'll get a quick render out of this and then prep it for our animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of this this capsule, and I want to replace that with a person. In the content browser, if you click that tab and click the little spotlight search, we can type in the word sit. We want to find somebody sitting. So I type in sit, hit enter, and there's a few people in here that we can use and just kind of load that directly into our viewport. So I'm just going to go ahead and let me grab this this casual sit. So I'll drop that in the viewport, and you can see that it came in kind of small, so we need to resize it. So we'll click our Objects tab with Casual 5 Sit selected. I'm going to go into my scale tool and go ahead and scale him up a bit. So let me go to model mode and just kind of scale him up, make him a little bit larger, and you can see he's sitting in the wrong direction. So I'm going to use my rotate tool and go ahead and rotate him around, facing in the direction of the z-axis, and that should work for my my character. So let's clean our scene up just a little bit, and we'll cut him down. You'll see that he's a little bit too big for the jet. So I'm just going to highlight the capsule, hit delete on my keyboard, and get rid of that, and go back to my model, and let's just see if we can get him to fit inside the cabin. So I'll go back to my move tool, move him down into the cabin, and I'll hold Option on the keyboard, just kind of move around, see if he fits. And it looks like he fits pretty well, but you can see that his feet are actually sticking out of the bottom of the jet. And I'm actually going to scale him up a little bit more, just so when we get into the animation part, we'll be able to see him as a character. So I'm going to move him down a little bit, set him in the cabin, and that looks pretty decent. Now, to chop his legs off, or basically to get rid of part of a model, it's pretty simple to do. We're going to bool him. We'll use a boolean, and let's walk through that really quick. But before we do, let me turn off the subdivision surface, or the jet. There are a couple of stoplights here, and we can click those stoplights, and that will basically turn off the view of the jet while we work. And then we're going to make this guy a child of this cube so that he stays in the jet. So let's go ahead and get into that. In order to do a bool or boolean, let's go ahead and grab, actually it's in this one, a bool, and we'll leave that at the top of the order. And we're going to grab a shape. We'll use a cube and move that cube down to where we want to cut off. And this morbidly sounds kind of odd, but we're going to cut off his legs, so just so they're not sticking out of the bottom of the plane. So I'll move this cube into position, and I'm going to try to cut off this this model right there where that cube is sitting. So in order to do that, we're going to make the cube and the casual guy a child of the bool. So I'm going to select my casual guy, hold shift, select the cube as well, and I'm going to drag those up underneath the bool, and it's going to subtract A from B, and it's set like that down here. So you can subtract B from A, or you can rearrange that. So if you're cutting off something that you wanted, just flip-flop these two objects when you put it in the bool. So that looks pretty good, and I can use that model in my my plane. Let me undo that. A couple other things I need to do. I'm going to select the bool, hold shift to get everything selected there, right click, and I'm going to do connect objects and delete. And when I do that, it deleted everything, and it gave me this bool object that I can use as my pilot. And let me turn the plane back on. With the bool selected, I can go ahead and center him up a little bit better. Actually, it looks like he's in pretty good shape there. And we'll probably have some issues with the reflectance of the glass, but that will be, at least we'll have a character to use for the animation. So I'm going to take that bool, or that character, and I'm going to drop it down here underneath my cube to make it a child of my plane. So now when my plane moves, the guy is sitting in it, and he's basically part of that build. A couple other things that I want to do to this. this jet. I had this this back section here that I added some material to. So let's go ahead and highlight that tag, and I'm going to add kind of a glowing feature to it. So I'm going to double click my material editor, and I had reflectance on, it looks like, and luminance we added, so it looks like it's kind of glowing. But I'm actually going to click glow, and I'm going to make that kind of look like I guess an afterburner, and have it glow a little bit more. So I'm going to use this outer strength bumped up to 500%. I think the default was 100, and when I do that and hit render, and this render is going to take a little while because I added that character to it, it's going to give me a little bit of a glowing effect that should kick in here toward the end of the render. And there we go, and make it look a little bit more realistic. And you can bump that up or down if you so choose to use that. And the other thing was these intakes I didn't quite finish up. So let me highlight my my model, my cube, and go into poly mode and go ahead and grab those by clicking and selecting. And I'm going to throw that material on those intakes as well. I'll get a quick render here, and then we'll get a good render to export and print. And then in the next video we'll get into the building a scene and add some animation. You can see that from this view you can't see the guy very well. But I guess if I add some lighting and kind of move him around, that will kick in and look a little bit better. Okay, so now if I'm totally happy with my jet, I'm going to click on subdivision surfaces, hold shift, click the bottom of the order, right click, and I'm going to go ahead and connect objects and delete. And when I do that, it's going to turn this into its own shape, and I'll be able to use this in my animation or for this this little still. Now I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. I'm going to raise my my jet up a little bit and kind of pan around and try to find a decent view of this jet to make it look like it's kind of flying in space. Now, if you lose your place with your jet selected, like let's say that we've zoomed out and we can't find our jet, if you hit O on your keyboard, it'll bring the object right back into view. We also have the ability to split screen, and with all of these different views, if you hit H on your keyboard, it will center all of those things up so that you can see them a little bit better too. So I'm going to go back to my original view, and I'm going to try to pan my camera underneath this, and we'll be using a couple different cameras in the animation, but I'm just going to get a quick let me go ahead and rotate it, a quick shot or a quick render of this jet. So let me go underneath it. That way we can see the sky, and I'm going to go ahead and put a landscape in here too. So I can go up here and add, let's just add a floor, and on that floor, let me see if I can just add some materials to that floor so that we can see it when I hit render. And we should see it bounce all the way back to that horizon line. And you can see that the green that I put on the floor is actually starting to reflect up onto the side of my jet. And I'm going to pull this into a little bit better better view here, and I'll go ahead and let that render and skip forward. So I'm not too happy with the green. I'm going to go ahead and delete that tag and go ahead and grab this this blue and throw that up on my floor, and I'll render it with that. Now, a couple of other things that I want to experiment with. The angle at which my render is going to be. I'm just going to use some of these navigation tools and navigate to a little bit better view. Kind of center it up. That looks pretty good. Now, with the physical sky, we're going to keep that for this render, but I'm going to swap that out for just a sky object when we get into the animation. But a couple of things that we can do to that to tweak the look of this, we can, with physical sky selected, go down to time and location, and you can actually bump through time so that you can get some different looks at what this render will look like. And you can see that the sun's actually moving through the sky as I click through this, and there's a night scene for us. If we would want to get some different looks at what this would look like, we can also go in and literally change the date, the month and the year, so on and so forth. So just some other options. Let's go to Basic and click Load Sky Preset. And here are some different looks to the sky as well. So if I click on this one to add some clouds, I might like the look of that a little bit better. And I'm actually going to go ahead and use that for this render. Now when I render this out, I can't see the guy very well, so I'm just going to grab a light, and let me zoom to where that light can be grabbed. I'm going to bring that up into my cabin and get a little bit closer to the guy, just so I can see him a little bit better and navigate back to where I was. And with that glass, I'm not going to make a whole lot of adjustments to it, but I can illuminate this area a little bit better if I so choose. Now, rather than hitting render and giving this time to render, I'm just going to kind of do this blindly and get you set up for a render that you can send out and go ahead and print. So let's go up to our render settings, and when we click those, a couple of setting changes that we want to make. For output, we're going to leave it current frame because this will just be a still. We're going to go to save, and you can select either TIFF, or if you want it to be a JPEG, you can do that, or a Photoshop document, so on and so forth. If we bump it into Photoshop, we can make some adjustments to it as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at TIFF, and I'm going to go down here to the effects, and I want to add Ambient, Occlusion, and Global Illumination. When I add those two, it'll make this look a little bit more realistic. I'll have some shadows in here that are already set up for me, and some colors bouncing off of my render. And let me just move this light a little bit more, just so I can kind of see where this is in space a little bit better. And it looks like it's back behind that wing, so let me just bring it up a touch. And that may be a bit harsh, but I'm going to go ahead and leave it for this render, and we'll take a look at that when it's finished. Okay, so with those render settings ready to go, I'm going to click Render to Picture Viewer, this middle button here, and it will render for export. And it may take a few passes, but I'll just go ahead and leave this go, and we'll jump forward. So my render's finished, and I'm ready to save it to the desktop to print it. So I'll go to File, Save As, and I'll leave it a still image. If it were an animation, we'd do selected frames and export those, but leave it still image. It gives you the option to save it as a TIFF still, or if you want to switch over to a JPEG or something, you can do that as well. And then click OK, give it a name. And it's ready to be printed. If you want to make changes, then you can go back and change anything that you need to. We'll be adding more concepts for materials, so on and so forth, with the animation. So if you decide you want to go back and get a still from that, you can do that as well.